The charge of the continuous sexual abuse of a minor under 14 years old carries up to 16 years in California state law, where the singer David has been accused of, among other things, the murder of 14-year-old Celeste Hernandez. I'm going to break down that charge and the two others. This is a Fame Under Fire legal deep dive on the David case with me, Anoushka Mutanda-Dougherty. If you don't know anything about it, we've done other episodes and you can find more here. But just a reminder, David has entered a not guilty plea on all charges. Now, when it comes to the continuous sexual abuse of a minor under 14 years old, this is what the prosecution allege.
As the evidence will come out in court, the witness to the investigation was Celeste. And the investigation was into the lewd and lascivious sexual acts committed by Mr. Burke that is the subject of count 2 of this complaint with Celeste while she was under 14 years old.
Whilst child sexual abuse is abhorrent at any age, period, California law makes a distinction when the child is under 14 years old because it views prepubescent children and young adolescent children as especially vulnerable. It also increases the amount of time the abuser can be sentenced to if convicted, gives the prosecution more leeway in terms of admitting prior sexual conduct in as evidence, and often means harsher bail conditions. Now, in this case, we know David is being held without bail. The element of the charge being continuous sexual abuse is also important. It means the prosecution don't have to prove individual acts of child sexual abuse tied to specific dates. Rather, they have to prove that there were 3 or more lewd acts or substantial sexual contact that occurred over at least 3 months. A big legal distinction is that any potential jury don't have to unanimously agree over specific acts tied to specific dates, but rather that there was a pattern of abuse within the specific time frame. Now, this law was actually created to help children who've experienced long-term sexual abuse, as it's difficult for them to recall specific acts or sequences of events. But let's take a look at the alleged evidence for continuous child sexual abuse that the prosecution have referred to in their preliminary briefing doc. Number 1. The descriptions of photographs of Celeste naked and engaged with the defendant in sexual activity when she was 13. They make clear these photos won't be shown at any potential preliminary hearing because this would constitute CSAM. That's child sexual abuse material, so descriptions will be given instead. Number 2, numerous text messages between the defendant and the victim evidencing their sexual relationship, pregnancy, abortion, and use of Plan B contraceptive pills. Now, they also include this, quote, "Messages through 2025 prove the defendant continued to manipulate the victim as she messaged, 'All we do is have sex and just hang out, man. I want more than that for myself.'" Now, it's not necessary to prove coercion or manipulation in cases of child sexual abuse because children can't be coerced into giving their consent, because they can't give their consent at all, they're too young. Even if they get up on the stand and say, "I wanted to do this, I was an active participant," legally, the law says you cannot consent. However, this text could be used at sentencing if David is convicted of this charge, because prosecutors can say there are aggravating factors in the way the crime was committed. That means the sentence applied needs to be enhanced, as in the criminal needs to be locked up for longer. So they could say, "Your Honor, not only did this person continuously abuse this child, when the child said they wanted to stop or were not happy, they disregarded what they said and continued to manipulate them so they could carry on with the abuse. For that reason, they should spend more time behind bars." Now let's take a look at the murder charge. Now, in this case, there are special circumstances applied to that murder charge. Those are lying in wait, murder for financial gain, and murdering a witness. Now, the prosecution apply special circumstances when they deem the way the crime was committed was especially egregious, that it should face elevated punishment in the eyes of the law. So in California law, first-degree murder does not automatically mean eligibility for the death penalty. However, if this case goes to trial and the prosecution prove the murder and prove at least one of the special circumstances, this case becomes eligible for the death penalty or life without parole. Now, right now when I'm recording this, we don't know if the district attorney's office are going to call for the death penalty. That's yet to be decided. There is also another point worth noting, that executions in California are paused under a gubernatorial moratorium. Now, gubernatorial means linked to a governor, and that is exactly what happened. Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, used his executive authority to pause executions in California. Now, prosecutors still ask for the death penalty for various reasons, like indicating the severity of the charge, and it can impact plea negotiations. Now, the special circumstances of murder for financial gain and murdering a witness are directly tied to the allegation of the continuous sexual abuse of a minor under 14 years old. So what the prosecution allege is that David was abusing Celeste, that this abuse started when she was 13 and he was 18. In the preliminary briefing document, this is what they said. April 23, 2025 is the likely date of the victim's death and when all her cellular activity ceased. The night prior, on April 22, 2025, defendant and the victim engaged in a lengthy argument described in detail in their text messages. The messages reveal the victim's jealousy over defendant's relationships with other women, as defendant led her to believe they had a future together. She became extremely upset and threatened to disclose damaging information about her relationship with defendant to end his career and destroy his life. Defendant's first studio album was due to be released on April 25, 2025. He had an emerging multi-million-dollar career already in progress. He also had multiple product endorsements which were highly profitable. At approximately 8:40 p.m. on the 23rd of April 2025, defendant sent an Uber to transport the victim from her Lake Elsinore home to his residence. They communicated before and during her Uber ride, which dropped her off at the defendant's Hollywood Hills home around 10:10 p.m. At approximately 10:30 p.m, defendant sent text messages to the victim inquiring where she was. The people contend this was part of the defendant's premeditated plan to cover up the murder, as she was already dead by this time. Knowing he had to silence the victim before she ruined his music career, as she had threatened, very soon after her arrival at his home, defendant stabbed the victim to death multiple times and stood by while she bled out. At no time did he call law enforcement or 911 or take her to an emergency room to attempt to save her life. So the prosecution are alleging that Celeste was the witness to a crime that was being committed against her, the continuous sexual abuse of a minor under 14 years old, and that if she reported this, it was investigated and went to trial, she could have testified as to what she experienced at that trial. Now, when it comes to the special circumstance of murder for financial gain, they're not saying that David was paid money to kill Celeste or received money for killing Celeste. They're alleging that he was mitigating against any future financial damage had she made their alleged illegal relationship public. The third special circumstance is lying in wait. This means the crime was premeditated and planned. It was not a crime of passion or self-defense. Now, this whole theory of murder that the prosecution have presented hinges on a determined cause of death. Let's take a look at what the medical examiner's report said. Quote, "Given the history and circumstances as currently known by me in the settings of the findings by examination and ancillary studies and in the absence of other definitive causes of death, the cause of death is multiple penetrating injuries." It also says, quote, "There are 2 penetrating wounds of the torso with smooth edges that may represent sharp force injuries." Now, legal experts have noted that the language in the medical examiner's report leaves room for doubt that this was the definitive cause of Celeste's death, and this is something that the defence might pick up on if this case goes to trial. The last charge is the unlawful dismemberment of human remains. This is what the prosecution allege is their evidence in the preliminary briefing document, and it is extensive. Tellingly, defendant subsequently purchased tools to carry out his plot to dismember and dispose of the victim's body. On April 24, 2025, defendant ordered a shovel from Home Depot that was delivered to his home from Postmates. On the 1st of May 2025, defendant ordered and subsequently Amazon delivered 2 chainsaws to his home. On the 5th of May 2025, defendant ordered and Amazon subsequently delivered a body bag, heavy-duty laundry bags, and a blue inflatable pool to his home. He made these purchases under the fake name Victoria Mendez. They continue. On the 7th of July 2025, defendant ordered and subsequently Amazon delivered a burn cage to his home under the same fake name as part of his plan to incinerate evidence. Moreover, defendant took horrifying measures to destroy and discard the victim's body. After placing her body into the blue inflatable pool to prevent her blood from spilling onto his garage floor, defendant used a chainsaw and perhaps other tools to cut off her limbs. Small blue plastic fragments were found embedded in the victim's remains, which were collected by the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner's Department. The fragments were analysed by the LAPD's Forensic Science Division Trace Analysis Unit. An expert was able to make a physical fit match from the blue fragments to the blue inflatable pool purchased by the defendant in May 2025. In order to distance himself from the victim, he amputated her left ring and pinky fingers because her ring finger contained a tattoo of his name. Her fingers have not been recovered. Defendant then placed her head and torso into the cadaver bag he purchased. He placed her limbs into a garbage bag which he deposited into his front trunk, laying the cadaver bag on top. For several weeks, or possibly months, defendant left the victim's body to decompose inside his Tesla. He lied to friends, business associates, and others who noticed a strong smell of decay in and around his home and vehicle. Before leaving on his concert tour at the end of July, he parked his Tesla on the street around the corner of his home. Now, when it comes to the Tesla, they also wrote, quote, "Surveillance video and other evidence confirmed defendant was the last person to drive the vehicle on July 29, 2025, before he left Los Angeles on a concert tour." Now, I've been asked a few times, are the dismemberment charge and the murder charge linked? And yes, in the prosecution's allegations, they are. They're alleging that David dismembered Celeste's body to hide the fact that he had murdered her. But legally, you can receive a conviction for the unlawful dismemberment of human remains without receiving a murder conviction, and this charge carries up to 3 years in jail. Now, we've done another episode on the latest David update, and we know that currently the preliminary hearing is scheduled for the 29th of June. We also know, of course, that David has entered a not guilty plea on all 3 charges, and his defence team have said that the evidence will show that he did not murder Celeste Rivas Hernandez, nor was he the cause of her death. That's it for this episode of Fame Under Fire with me, Anoushka Mutanda-Dougherty. Make sure you subscribe to the Fame Under Fire YouTube channel so you never miss an episode, and leave some questions in the comments below.